In addition to the frustration I was experiencing during my time online, many of the people in my rather large circle of friends and family knew of my spiritual work, yet hardly anyone would inquire as to what it was about or what it was I was trying to accomplish. I found it amazing, and still do, that something so immense could mean so little to so many people. Perhaps people with strong human support feel not the need for spiritual support. And let's face it, there are some not so wonderful people and events, which I will not mention here, associated with God and religion, that can naturally turn people off and away from God. But always, always keep in mind that these negative aspects of spirituality come from the negative aspects of human nature and human choices. This should not and cannot change or diminish the actual greatness of God, for He is absolute in His goodness and perfection. Yet still, a lot of the time, just the mere mention of God could generate ambivalence in a person. Over time, I found myself using the more benign term spiritual in place of God simply because spiritual is a word that most people will not run away from. It is true that we don't have to seek God in the same way we don't have to look for that special someone, or have children, or develop deeper friendships. These relationships are optional. I know plenty of people who aren't interested in these associations, and they seem to get along just fine. But when we seek, find, and open ourselves up to these cornerstone relationships, the rewards are tremendous, and in my estimation, vital. Chapter 20, Hard Times. By the fall of 2001, I had enough written text to create a website. My hope was that this site would go viral, with people going there by the thousands to view this amazing work. This never took place. But still, I kept plugging away in my chat room, trying ever so hard to teach and influence people spiritually. I could see I was growing as a teacher, and was feeling really good about where this work was heading, but on the home front, things couldn't have been any worse. Both my wife and I were beginning to buckle under the pressures of life with young children and all of the stresses that go with it. We began keeping score of how much free time each of us had, and if the number seemed in balance, the other would become indignant. I would lie about my whereabouts so I could go record shopping with friends, or I would get home late from work because I took the long way home on my motorcycle, claiming that I had to work late. Eventually, she would find out about these indiscretions, which caused her to lose trust in me. This was devastating to our relationship. She would express to me over and over about how she didn't need me and how she could do this all by herself. During this time, I was living on a steady diet of criticism, and I felt like I couldn't do anything right. There were many times I thought to myself, she must have married the wrong person, and I wouldn't have been surprised if one day she came up to me and said, "I've had it, it's over." Fortunately, that day never came. While it's certainly true that these were painful and trying times, I never wanted to throw in the towel on our marriage and call it quits. I knew deep down that there was a real and special bond between us that would outlast any of the hardships that we were facing at present. My feeling was that if we remained a unit and worked together, we would eventually get through this. And eventually, we did. At my job, things weren't a whole lot better for me. There was a real and measurable level of animosity directed squarely in my direction, mainly because I represented two things most people find detestable: wealth and privilege. Wealth because of the rather large and valuable home I lived in with a very small mortgage, and privilege because I was the boss's brother-in-law. In their eyes, I was a slacker who was unwilling to take on more for the company. And looking at it objectively, I could understand their feelings. Delivering was easy, and I was the boss's friend and brother-in-law. I was neither comfortable being a salesman, nor was I really qualified to be one, which showed in my performance or lack thereof. I would decline offers to work inside the store, which drove some employees crazy. I just couldn't get excited about an industry I had no real passion for. I never wanted a career in auto supply. Trust me, a solid auto parts counterman has to know a million things. It is hard work and a serious profession, but I just wanted a job. I wanted a job I didn't have to think about after 5 o'clock, and a job that was easy with little stress. This way I could focus on my true passions, music and spirituality. But rather than buckle under the pressure and quit a job I liked for a person I loved, I would try to become the best driver the business had ever seen. Although I would never become an authentic auto parts specialist, I was a reliable, dependable, accurate delivery driver that developed into a somewhat serviceable sales rep. I always tried to have a positive attitude and was pleasant to employees and customers alike. If anyone had a problem with me, I would simply kill him with kindness, and by and large, this worked well for me. The ownership, who couldn't have been better with all of this, recognized my strengths and simply let me be and do my job. But nonetheless, the tension I felt there was real, and each day was a challenge. My goals there, like at home, would be simple. Be strong, always stay composed, be kind and respectful, and always strive to take the high road. Yet still, like it was with my mother and dropping out of college, it's really hard to disappoint people, especially people you love and care about. I do not mean to or wish to come across as woe is me, or I was right and everyone else was wrong, with all these struggles both at home and at work. There were no good guys and bad guys here. Most of the time it was simply differing points of view, which is good and healthy. Still, we all are, at some point in life, challenged by something or someone, and the challenges I faced at this particular time were very real and very significant. And the reasons I write about them are not to indict anyone or to blame anyone. I write about them to illustrate how important it is to have a solid support system, and especially the role God played in getting me through these rather difficult and strenuous times. Chapter 21. Keeping On. After spending so much energy on my marriage and the difficulties that presented themselves at work, patience with my children was in short supply, and I was hardly the good father I should have been. As much as I tried, I could never seem to keep my composure when it came to dealing with childhood issues. But once again, my daily practice of morning and evening prayer, coupled with almost continuous conscious spiritual awareness, was essential for me in coping with both my work and home life. These habits were critical in two ways. One, they helped me get through the day in one piece by providing immediate, in-the-moment support and strengthening, and secondly, they influenced my overall long-term growth and development as a human being. There is no question in my mind that these most significant relationships in my life would have most likely fallen to pieces had I not been spiritually fortified. Never would I have made it through without the internal support from God and the external support from the people closest to me. And I am absolutely certain I would not be the person I am without either of them. With all that was going on with my marriage, my children, and the people at work, my online chat room and making music with my band were the too few places I actually felt good about myself. Positive, productive conversations in my chat room would energize my evenings and have me walking on air the entire next day. I soon found myself becoming addicted to the satisfaction that comes as a result of helping a fellow person. I wouldn't mind missing weekly band practice, which was unheard of, because it gave me the opportunity to open my chat room where I might meet someone who was interested in knowing about God. Once I got a taste of real service and the happiness and fulfillment it garnered, it became all I wanted to do. It was a real magical time for me and hopefully for the people I was talking with. Chapter 21. Getting Better. My wife began receiving personal counseling for her depression in the spring of 2002. It took a great deal of courage and determination to face her dilemma head-on, and I admire her greatly for that. She realized that she would stand a better chance at recovery if she had some professional, objective, outside help, and she was right. We all witnessed an immediate change in her personality, attitude, outlook, and overall state of being. With each passing month, she grew stronger and more confident, as well as simply becoming a happier and more peaceful person. It was an amazing transformation that just goes to show how important it is to have self-respect and personal integrity within, in addition to positive living support from others, for all of the challenges that this life presents to all of us. It's also critical for the long-term goal, that is, to better oneself from within. When my website failed to yield the results I hoped it would, I found myself back at the drawing board. As great as it is, the computer screen can seem rather cold when you compare it to something that you can touch and hold in your hand. This time, my vehicle for helping people would be print on paper. I began working on what would become a pamphlet and eventually this book, while delivering auto supplies at work. Whenever a pertinent thought came to my mind, I would quickly jot it down. Most of what I was writing down was based on the previous night's chat room conversations. Using my website as a starting point, I began to construct what I hoped would be an epic piece of spiritual literature that would change the way people think about and approach God. I would dream about people in homes all across the United States, as well as the rest of the world, making this epic discovery. A discovery that would change their lives and the lives of the people around them until everyone knew what the experience of knowing God was all about. Beginning in December of 2003, I began the painstaking process of gathering up and trying to put into order the dozens of little notes scribbled down on scrap pieces of paper. I would spend the next 4 months trying to separate the wheat from the chaff and turn my pile of written rubble into a cohesive composition that I would title after my website, Finding and Knowing God. The primary challenge would be, as it always is, and especially if one's not a writer, to put into the written word something that is first and foremost a living experience. Writing in this way was like trying to describe the sound of music, the beauty of art, or the flavor of food. Words fall way short. But regardless of these obstacles, I labored hard over each sentence, making sure it was the absolute best I could make it. I was quite happy and proud of this achievement, and besides my chat room, this written work would provide me with another tool to help people find God. Chapter 22, Midlife. When I completed my little booklet in March of '04, I decided to take some time off from spiritual work. It was also around this time, a few months away from my 39th birthday, that I began going through a midlife crisis of sorts. I was finding that I didn't have the same energy and stamina I once had. My eyesight was getting progressively worse. I had developed gum disease. I was beginning to notice lines and wrinkles on my face, and my pants were feeling tighter around my waist. Aches and sprains that once went away in a few days would linger for weeks and months. My sex drive was noticeably down, which naturally caused my anxiety level to go up. All of these worries came to a climax when I found myself in the emergency room of an area hospital. I was at the grocery store on a gorgeous summer Saturday when I began experiencing these funny heart palpitations. I first experienced these same symptoms the previous August after ingesting some energy supplements to help get me through working nights. Only this time I wasn't taking anything. As the hours passed, I could feel myself growing more and more worried, which intensified the heaviness I was now feeling in my chest. At this point, I became sweaty and my breathing was erratic, and I thought for sure I was experiencing real, serious heart trouble. In my mind, I was going through all of my recent midlife concerns that only intensified what was now a full-fledged panic attack. I made an excuse to get out of the house and drove myself to the ER, where I was given a few tests and a pill for anxiety. After reading the results of the scan, the doctor explained to me that my heart was occasionally skipping a beat, which caused the next beat to be stronger, and this is what I was feeling in my chest. He also suggested that I see a cardiologist if I felt that his explanation wasn't to my liking. By now, the medication they had given me was working, and I was feeling relaxed and a little bit embarrassed. I drove myself home feeling relieved, but also a bit concerned. 2 days later, I woke up with the same heart palpitations, and once again the panic machinations were set in motion. My wife and I wasted no time in going to a different hospital that specialized in cardiology. Once again, I found myself in an ER with a doctor who told me pretty much the same things the previous doctor had. But knowing that this wouldn't be enough for my now fragile psyche, he scheduled me for a stress test and echocardiogram. This way I would know for sure that I didn't have a life-threatening heart condition. The problem now was that the test wouldn't be for another month. I woke up the next morning feeling down, depressed, and completely shell-shocked. How could I, Mr. God-knowing, emotional, psychological titan, be reduced to a sack of rubble in an emergency room chair? In a matter of a few short days, I became weak and frail. All I wanted to do was turn off the lights, close the shades, and go to sleep. But deep down, I knew that would be the worst thing I could do. I petitioned God long and hard that morning to be fully receptive to his encouragement, support, and supreme influence. I needed now more than ever the extra strength and confidence to get up, get moving, and get my mind and spirit back to where it had once been. Sure enough, as always, God would not let me down. The first thing I did was to mow the lawn. Human emotion is not a switchboard that one can instantly adjust or turn off and on at will. It is often a challenge keeping it together emotionally, which is why the following month, waiting to take my cardio tests, would be a day-to-day struggle. I still wasn't wholly convinced that my heart palpitations were completely benign. Every time I would experience any kind of chest discomfort or felt the slightest bit dizzy or lightheaded, I would feel the wheels of the anxiety machine start to turn. I would have to do everything in my power to keep that small spark from turning into a raging fire, and for the most part I was able to do just that, keep it at bay. Even to this day, I still feel susceptible to anxiety's unjustified yet debilitating grip. After an excruciating month, I went back to the hospital to take the cardio test that I hope would confirm my physical well-being and give me the psychological assurance my mind so desperately needed. After completing all the tests and consulting with the cardiologist, I was given a clean bill of health. After hearing those few magic words, I could feel the stress I had been harboring for many weeks instantly evaporate. The entire experience gave my perspective a shot in the arm, and I began to live life with a heightened sense of purpose and determination. I realized that my time here on Earth is finite, and I should no longer put off my goals and aspirations, especially my dream of helping people spiritually. That fall, my first order of business, besides getting life insurance, was to produce copies of my booklet for distribution. My goal was to go to small area bookstores to see if they would be interested in selling these small booklets. I even sent a copy to the program director at Boston's National Public Radio station with hopes of doing a live program about God. I turned my defunct website into a place where people could order my booklet. Everything was now in place for me to begin my next phase of trying to help people find God, and with that change the world. 6 months later, after so much hope, I found myself feeling the same way I did 2 years earlier, down and dejected. My booklet never made it into any bookstores because I lacked the drive as well as the confidence needed to approach people about my work. I never got on the radio either, but I did manage to get some of these booklets into a few people's hands. I accomplished this primarily through my online chat room, where I would mail copies to people who were interested in reading it. And I gave some to people I knew personally. All in all, I gave away about 50 copies to mixed reviews. For some, it lacked the fire and brimstone, shock and awe, the volume and power, and the pomp and circumstance that many people envision when they think about God. Some liked it for its simplicity and straightforward message. But for most people, at 12 pages, it simply lacked depth. It just wasn't meaty enough. And with that, I would have to agree, but it was all that I had. Once again, I would be back at the drawing board, but this time I would be out of ideas.